Good morning. Welcome back to Open Med School. The last session we have discussed about the types of study designs. We are divided mainly into observational study and experimental study. The observational studies were again classified into descriptive studies and analytical studies. The analytical studies are the cohort studies, case control studies, and cross-sectional studies can also be analytical studies. The descriptive studies are the case reports, case series, and cross-sectional studies. So today I will be discussing one article from European Journal of Cardiovascular Medicine and discuss what are the features of descriptive study and what are the drawbacks. So let us start. So in this article, what the author plans, he described it as an observational descriptive study. So let us look into the methodology. There are 100 ischemic stroke cases from one hospital, 1 year duration. Data on risk factors and outcomes were recorded. There were no control groups. Therefore, the actual study design is actually an observational study. It is observation only, and they are only describing. So it is a describing. So it is an observational descriptive study. So what are the observational descriptive studies? There you divide into, one is the case report, second is case series, and third is cross-sectional studies. So let us go a little more into the details. So these are actually hospital-based descriptive case series. So now comes the question, in case series, how many cases are there? In case report, one rare case is reported. So the case reports are for the rare cases, where the case series are for pattern of a particular type of cases. So hope this point is clear. Case reports are rare cases are reported single case report. Case series are patterns of different cases. What is the usual number? Is around, or is usually less than 10. But actually there is no upper limit, but usually the number is taken less than 10. So that is about the case series and the case reports. So in descriptive studies, in this article, only patients with ischemic strokes were included. There were no comparison groups. Data collected were on demography, risk factors, severity, and outcome. So this is a typical descriptive observational study. So let us look into what is a research question, because the designs are based on the research question. The author describes the research question as what are the risk factors and their prognostic value in patients with ischemic stroke. So being a descriptive study, you cannot infer the prognostic value. So as per the study title, the research question is what are the demographic characteristics, risk factors, clinical course, and outcome among ischemic patients, ischemic stroke patients admitted to a tertiary care center. That is some ideal research question. Why? Because descriptive studies describe patterns. They do not establish causal relationships. So there is no inference is made. This is only description. So what is the correct design or the title for the design? Hospital-based observational descriptive study is acceptable. Or hospital-based descriptive case series of ischemic stroke patients. So this is how we will write the design of a study. Now, we look into what are the key features of a descriptive study. So descriptive studies focus on distribution of disease. That is according to person, age, sex. That is the demographic features are described. And also you look at the risk factors. So the location is also important. So it is described as general hospital, Chilipattanam. Then the time duration is important because the pattern of a disease during a particular period is analyzed or not analyzed, described. So October 22 to September 23, 1 year study. This allows observation of temporal distribution. Now we'll look into how will you present the results. Descriptive studies usually presents the result as one frequencies, second is percentage, third mean with the standard deviation. This is the typical way of we present. So what is frequency? Here 100 patients are there. So total case is 100. The 55 had hypertension, 45 had diabetes. So you can we are reporting it as the frequency of the diseases. Then you can put it as not only frequency, because suppose the number is 120 and the case is the number of hypertensive are 60. Say to put it as percentage, it will become here it is 50 and here it is 55 percentage. So that is why when you are presenting the data, not only the frequency, but also the percentage should also be given, and also the suppose age, etc. Continuous variables, you go for the mean with the standard deviation about the variables, and these things we'll discuss later. So here you can see that the percentage is given and also the frequency both are same. That is very okay. Now going to the description they have given. That is, it is in the study, it is reported that the P is 0.001 for association between hypertension, diabetes, and outcome. Ideally, in a descriptive study, observational descriptive study, there is no inference is made, no analysis is made. So, without a proper comparative group or an analytical design, the inferences cannot be made. So, that is one of the point you should remember. That is in this case, there is no control is there. So actually, and there is no analysis is being done. So this inference is not appropriate. So the critical analysis of this study design, the strengths are, this is a simple design, useful for hospital data, describe the stroke risk profile, and it generates hypothesis for future studies. So one of the main usefulness of the observational descriptive study, it is for generating a hypothesis. So the major flaws in the methodology, here there is no control group. So you can say that hypertension, diabetes, and smoking were common among or the common characteristics among stroke patients. But being the traditional risk factors, you can use it as a risk factor here. So to establish it as a risk factor, if you are doing some other studies to identify a risk factor for a particular thing, you have to do or the study must compare. So here, if you are doing a comparative study or analytic study, it should be stroke patients and patients without stroke. And such design, the ideal one will be a case control study if it is a rare problem. So identifying or establishing causal relationship, you should go for a rare case, you go for a case control study, or you should go for a cohort study. The hospital-based samples. So there are certain problems here. One is the bias. About the bias, I will discuss later. So here in the hospital, severe cases are likely to be admitted. So it's not a representative of the community. So this cannot be generalized, as the study was from a tertiary hospital. And the sample size is 100. The statistical power will be low. The sample size calculation we'll discuss later. So confounding factors were not addressed. So factors that can affect the outcome. That is a confounding factor. Third factor. I will discuss the confounding factors in another session. Here, age, socioeconomic status, comorbidities, they can influence the outcome. They are called the confounding factors. So, what the study in this study should conclude: hypertension, diabetes, smoking were common among ischemic stroke patients. As per the study, they cannot conclude that these are causes without a comparative study. So how the study can be improved? As mentioned, one, you can go for case control study. Cases are the stroke patients, controls are the non-stroke individuals. Compare the exposures. So case control study is a retrospective study to take a stroke patient and go backwards to identify what were the exposures. Or you can arrange for a cohort study. Say follow individuals with and without risk factors. Just time consuming. So key learning points from this example. Descriptive studies describe the disease distribution. They use frequencies, percentages, mean, width, mean and standard deviation. That is how you describe. Focus on the demographic features, and it is useful for hypothesis generation. Cannot determine the relationships. So this paper essentially is a hospital-based descriptive study. It's an observational descriptive study, or you can say hospital-based descriptive case series for ischemic patients. Hope this discussion was useful. In the following sessions, we'll be discussing analytical studies, bias, confounding factors, and variables. Stay tuned.